For those new folks out there that don't know who I am, Zor Morales, realtor out in Hawaii. Went through the program 2 years ago and benefited from it, benefited from how it's formatted, got plugged in with a solid team out here in Hawaii and hit the ground running. Now my wife and I are both full-time realtors. I'm loving it. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me offline. Today we have another special class coming from Nick Warnoff. I'm sure you guys enjoyed the last one. Today he'll be talking about creative financing. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to him right now. You have the
All
floor, Nick.
right, cool. Thank you. Let's go share screen, screen two, share. And is everybody seeing creative financing?
Got it.
All right, awesome. Cool. Well, let's get started then. This is going to be a very intro, like basic understanding of creative financing. So don't expect to get into any specifics or anything. If you do want to get into it, I highly suggest you talk to your team leader or broker because they're going to know the specifics of the state you live in. All right. First, let's start off with a disclaimer. Okay. First off, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a CPA. I'm a real estate agent licensed in the state of California. All right. You're going to find, if you Google this, there's a lot of people on the internet talking about these techniques and they've never used them. And I'm about to be one of those people. Okay. Everything you see in this slide or in this presentation comes from colleagues who have used it or trusted sources, mostly on the internet, that I would trust to get the information from. Okay. But I'm challenging you. Okay. Verify everything you see in this presentation. If you see anything wrong, don't be scared of DMing me or just putting it in the comments. All right. Because I want you to get the correct information and I want to have the correct information. Okay. So I'm not going to be upset if you're like, oh, wait, no, that's illegal. Or, a specific, like in some state where this doesn't fly. That's totally fine. Okay. So on that, this is a broad overview of the strategies. Okay. There will be specific differences based on what state the said property is in. And we'll get into a few of those later. All right. If you are going to use any of these methods or suggest any of them to your clients, talk to your broker or team lead. Okay. Get that verification, especially from your broker, on the legal issues associated with said method. Okay. I don't want any of you to go, I don't know, appear in front of a judge and be like, well, the guy from Skillbridge said, well, the guy from Skillbridge is saying right now, I am not a legal authority on this. Okay. As a real estate agent, I can help you in the state of California do some of these. But at the end of the day, I'm going to be going to the broker too to get clarification. Okay. Cool. Can we mute everyone else? Let's see. Is that a thing, Zor?
Yeah, I'll get them when they pop up.
Okay, cool. All right. Next slide. All right. What is creative financing? All right. ChatGPT says it refers to non-traditional or unconventional methods used to buy or sell properties. These methods are designed to solve financial barriers when the standard financing options, like obtaining traditional bank loan, are not available or not suitable for the buyer, the seller, or the type of property involved. The primary objective is to facilitate the purchase or sale of a property by using innovative strategies that fit the needs of all parties involved. Okay, so we're going to get into what those innovative strategies are. But first, let's talk about the biggest barrier right now and why creative financing is so big. It's the interest rates. We have historically high interest rates, higher than they've been in the last 20 years. And when you combine that high interest rates with the already difficult affordability of homes, it makes buying a home very difficult in today's market. And that's why we've seen such a steep drop off in the number of home sales almost nationwide. There's a few select markets where it's still continuing to climb, but those are the exception and not the rule. Okay, so let's see why this is such a hot topic right now and what methods people are using. All right, why does creative financing matter to you? Let's say you're an investor, or let's say you're not an investor. You're not interested in being the next like sub-2 millionaire. All right, there's a lot of reasons for you to still learn these creative financing methods just to be a good real estate agent. All right. First off, it's just going to put more tools in your tool belt for helping clients close deals. Okay, so you're going to be like this GigaChat agent right here with all these different options to choose from in your tool belt to make sure that a deal that maybe wouldn't close with traditional financing can step over that final hurdle, okay, and get to the closing line. All right, next. Oh, well, here's a couple of examples. All right, first, my client didn't qualify for financing the entire house. Luckily, the seller was willing to finance the difference. Very common method. I've seen this done. Let's say the appraisal comes in and the house doesn't reach appraisal, okay? For whatever reason, appraisals can be total shit shows sometimes. All right. The seller still really wants to sell. The buyer, of course, still really wants to buy. All right. They can seller finance that last little bit. And that's a perfectly legal and common practice. All right. Second, my landlord wants to sell the home I live in. I don't want to move, but don't have enough money for the down payment. Luckily, my real estate agent friend in Group Group's Skill Bridge program suggested a lease with an option to buy, and the landlord agreed to the terms. Another very common program. All right. And I just had to throw the Group Group plug in there as well. Luckily, you're here learning this. You can use this strategy. Fun story. My mother actually used this program when someone wanted to buy a house from her. We are from a small town. The leasee wanted to buy the home or didn't want to move. My mother was moving and wanted to sell her property, so she ended up doing a lease with an option to buy. This is a very common practice. And about my mother, she's not a real estate professional or anything. She just had a good real estate agent that suggested this option. Okay. All right, broader range of clients. Okay, this one's huge. All right, first off, investors looking to structure deals to maximize ROI. Investors want to make money. They want to spend the lowest amount of money out of pocket and they want to make the most return on investment. Okay, that is going to come from using creative financing. If you can cut out the middleman of the bank and skip the financing costs of financing, the high interest rates, okay, that come along with financing, you're doing a lot better. Okay. It also comes from fix and flips. Okay. Flippers typically don't use traditional financing because of the high costs and also the rules that come along with traditional financing on properties. They don't typically use it. Okay. So that's another one. All right. Clients who don't qualify for traditional financing. All right. This could be you for your first 2 years as a real estate agent. Your pay is going to be commission based. Okay. That means the banks probably aren't going to lend to you. All right. Until you can demonstrate that you have a reliable income. All right. This is going to be other sales professionals. So car salesmen, for example, might need non-traditional financing to purchase a home. Okay. Other clients would be gig workers, right? Business owners. And here in California, I've actually seen influencers have that issue where they make a ton of money online, but they don't have the traditional W-2 income that banks like to see. All right. And the last example is it can help you buy properties that don't qualify for traditional financing. So let's say you come across a property, right? And for whatever reason, it doesn't meet the standard for an FHA or VA loan, right? Well, you could buy that house with non-traditional financing and then refinance it later. Okay. And you'll find out when you do FHA properties and VA properties, there can be some pretty non-standard or some pretty benign reasons that it doesn't qualify. I was looking at a home recently. It didn't qualify for FHA financing because it didn't have an oven range, which is weird. You wouldn't think a home doesn't have an oven range, but it's not unsafe to live in. You just install the oven range, like not a big deal. But that's a rule that FHA requires, and you wouldn't be able to purchase that home without that oven range. So it can give you an option to fix it up and then refinance it into a traditional mortgage later. All right. Important terms to understand before we go into the methods. Balloon payment. A balloon payment is a larger than usual one-time payment at the end of the loan term. If you have a mortgage with a balloon payment, your payments may be lower in years before the balloon payment comes due, but you could owe a big amount at the end of the loan. Okay. So you actually see this a lot in commercial real estate and commercial financing. Okay. So the lender will give you a loan for say 30 years, right? It'll be amortized for a 30-year schedule. So you'll make payments as if that loan is going to last 30 years. But then they'll say there's a, say, 5-year balloon payment that you're going to have to pay off. All right. And what that is you're not actually going to have to come up with all of that money all at once. That's unrealistic. You're just going to have to refinance. Okay. Let's get into a more specific example. All right. Johnny bought a fourplex from his uncle, seller financed at 5%, amortized over 30 years with a 5-year balloon. After 5 years, Johnny had enough money to refinance into a traditional mortgage and pay his uncle the remaining balance. Okay. So say he couldn't afford the down payment on the property when Johnny's uncle wanted to sell it. Johnny's uncle said, well, that's okay. You just pay me what you can for 5 years. And then in 5 years, hopefully you've made enough money off the property. You've saved up. You can afford to put 20% down on a conventional loan. Okay. That's a perfectly reasonable example that can happen. All right. The due on sale clause, another big term. It's a provision in a mortgage or deed of trust that allows the lenders to demand full payment of the loan balance upon the sale or transfer of ownership of the property securing the loan. Okay, so the reason that I chose this guy, all right, the boogeyman, is that my understanding from other real estate investors who have ignored this pretty much is that it is the boogeyman. Okay. Banks don't often actually enforce the due on sale clause because the foreclosure process is more expensive than just taking payments, right? If you are continuing to make payments, they don't really care who it comes from, most mortgage companies. Okay, but I do have to mention this because this is a very real thing that is in almost all mortgages. And it could happen. And we're going to go through a couple examples of creative financing where this might be a concern, but also transferring your property into an LLC that you own could trigger the due on sale clause. Okay. So I know a lot of investors who do it though. They do it for every property because they would rather have the risk of a due on sale clause being activated than the risk of a lawsuit. Okay. From one of their properties, because if someone sues you for a property that you own directly, not owned through an LLC, then they can sue you for everything you own versus the due on sale clause. Well, you'll have to refinance the house. Oh no. So yeah, it is a strategy. It is worth understanding. But again, a lot of investors just see it as the boogeyman. If you're making regular payments on your property, the bank does not care who it comes from. Okay. All right. Common methods of creative financing. Here they are: seller financing, lease options, sub 2, equity share, wraparound mortgage, loan assumption, and hard money lenders. So let's get into the specifics. All right. Lease option. All right. The buyer leases the property with an option to buy it later. Important statement being option. Okay. They do not have to buy it. They are not legally obligated to buy. Okay. Often it is predetermined. It is at a predetermined price. A portion of the monthly lease payment may go towards the purchase price. Okay, so let's get into an example. Larry wants to sell his investment property, but it is currently rented to his long-term loyal tenant, Jacob. Okay, Jacob knows Larry wants to sell the house, but he doesn't want to move or have a new landlord that could increase his rent or kick him out. However, Jacob doesn't have the money for a down payment or credit for a mortgage. Okay, Larry offers to sell the property to Jacob as a lease option. All right, Jacob will continue to inhabit the property, making increased rent payments that will go towards his down payment. Okay, that's called a premium, as he works to improve his credit. Okay, so he's going to continue paying rent. He's going to pay a premium on top of that rent. At the end of the term, okay, he has the option to buy the property, and then that premium would go towards the down payment. Okay, now the other part of that is if he chooses not to buy the property, okay, depending on their terms, Larry could just keep that premium. And that's just the cost of giving Jacob that option to buy. If he doesn't perform, that's on him. Okay. So after the term of the lease, Jacob has the option to purchase the property for the agreed price. All right. Again, Jacob doesn't have to. All right. It's his option. If real estate values drop significantly or some kind of issue comes up, Jacob may not want the house. So, all right. Next is equity share. All right, two parties come together where one brings the financing and the other provides the property or the ability to maintain it. That's just an example. It could be, there could be different terms. After a predetermined period, they might sell the property and share the proceeds, or one party can buy out the other. It's very true. All right, here's an example. Tony has found an awesome off-market investment property, but he doesn't have the money to purchase it. Gregory, a retired CPA, has tons of money in his retirement account he is looking to redirect. Right? Tony offers Gregory 50% equity in the property if he funds the down payment and repairs. Gregory agrees so long as Tony is responsible for the mortgage payments and property management. Right? They purchase the property together, both names on mortgage and title. All right. And then the equity share would look something like this, right? Gregory owns 25%, Tony has 25%, and the bank has 50% equity in the property. Okay. This is a very, very oversimplified example. Okay. But it is a realistic, somewhat realistic example, okay, of how this could work. All right. So, Tony, he's out trying to make it on his own, trying to become a real estate investor, doesn't have a whole lot of startup, finds his retired friend Gregory, who has a ton of money, but not a lot of time, maybe. All right, they partner up, and Gregory's able to get essentially a good investment. Tony is able to get free real estate. All right, so you'll see this a lot in something called syndications, which if you don't know what that is, please Google it. It's another great avenue to make money in real estate. All right, next is hard money lenders. All right, these are usually private individuals or companies, small banks included, that lend money based on the property's value rather than the borrower's creditworthiness. They generally charge higher interest rates than traditional banks. Okay, these are not insured, right? You see, most banks are insured by the FDIC. Hard money lenders are not. They are not sold on the secondary market. Okay, so like when you get a mortgage, okay, that mortgage gets bundled with a bunch of other mortgages, and then they're sold to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. Not true for hard money lenders. Okay, so they don't have to meet those Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac standards. All right, so they are not subject to the normal approval process of getting approved by a mortgage. If you've ever done that before, you know it's pretty strict. All right, and the property is not subject to that approval process either. Okay, so you see this a lot in fix and flips. Okay, they're neglected properties. They don't meet standard financing rules. All right, so you go get a hard money lender. The hard money lender says, "Yeah, I'll give you $100,000 for this property worth 150 after you repair it." Sure, and you fix and flip it, sell it. Hard money lender gets their interest rates and their payments, and then the flipper gets their profit. Okay, typically you're not only buying. You're not only paying a higher interest rate. That 8 to 15% is pretty common. If you can get one as low as 8 nowadays, you're doing great. You will also buy something called points, and it's essentially just money to borrow money. You're going to pay a premium to borrow that much money on a property that may not, poses a substantial risk to the hard money lender. Okay, here's an example. Clarence has found a neglected property on the MLS he wants to purchase as a fix and flip. Because the home is in disrepair, it won't qualify for traditional bank financing. He asks Peter, a hard money lender, if he can borrow the money for the purchase of the home and repairs. Peter agrees, but only pays Clarence in installments when the money is required. Okay, so that's a common method that hard money lenders use in order to control the risk. They don't just give the borrower all the money, right, at once. No, because then the borrower could just skip town and, well, good luck finding him, right? No, they're going to give it in installments, and sometimes they pay the contractors directly. Okay. After the home is repaired, Clarence can either sell the home for a profit or refinance to pay back Peter. Okay. This refers to something called the Burr method. So we talked about that in the last slide. It's a great option. If you can get a property from neglected to up to standards for a conventional loan, I mean, there's definitely going to be money in it, and you'll probably be able to rent that property out at a profit. Okay, but that could also pose substantial risks if it doesn't qualify for refinancing anymore, or you run out of money during that during the rehab. You're stuck with a non-cash flowing property in disrepair. So there's a huge risk involved with doing this kind of work. Okay. Next is seller financing. Seller acts as the bank, lending to the purchase amount or portion of it to the buyer. The buyer then makes regular payments to seller to the seller based on the agreed terms. Okay. This can be in the form of a promissory note or land contract. All right. You'll see this is also called seller carry or seller carry back and owner financing. Okay. So let's go into an example of that. All right. Betty has been a landlord for 40 years and is ready to retire, but doesn't want to sell all her properties at once since she would be hit with a large capital gains tax. Okay. So she offers to sell a property to her nephew, Tony, at 0% interest with no cash down, which is why I depicted Betty as the fairy godmother of money. Okay. She's really hooking Tony up, but this isn't an unreal example. This happens. All right. She's just happy with the monthly payments. All right. And to keep the property in the family. All right. Tony accepts and becomes a millionaire. Okay. So you do see this sometimes, but more likely what you're going to see, like if you were to go on the MLS right now and search for seller carry, all right, you would find that there is an interest rate, right? It's going to be like 3 to 5%ish. Okay. It's typically lower than bank financing. Okay. But they're going to ask for significant cash down. Okay. And for one thing, you also have to pay the difference. Well, we'll get into that later off if they have a mortgage in the property, but it typically requires significant cash down. And then it is lower than bank financing terms. You don't have to pay, for instance, private mortgage insurance or the closing costs associated with traditional financing. But the seller is going to want something. He's not just going to take on that risk for free. Okay. All right. Wraparound mortgages. So this is if Betty here still owed money on the property. Okay. But she sold it to Tony, and Tony continued, Betty continued to make payments. All right. So we'll get into a different example, but wraparound mortgage. A new mortgage is created that wraps around the existing one. The buyer makes payments based on this larger wraparound loan amount, while the seller continues to make payments on the original loan. The difference between the two is profit for the seller. Okay. This could trigger the due on sale clause that we talked about earlier. One very important fact of this. Okay. Here's an example. John, this cool looking operator right here, owes $150,000 on his mortgage with an interest rate of 4%. His monthly payments are $1,000. Math doesn't check out, but okay. Sarah wants to buy the property, but can't qualify for traditional financing. Okay, this is Sarah down here. She's a new boot, right? Doesn't quite have the credit history to qualify for traditional financing. Okay, but John agrees to let Sarah take out a wraparound mortgage for the purchase. Now, it's important to note here, when we say John agrees to let Sarah take out a wraparound mortgage, she didn't go to the bank to get that wraparound mortgage. No. She created a note with John for the wraparound mortgage. No bank is ever going to let you create a wraparound mortgage like that. Okay. So she is now agreeing, John, I owe you, okay, X amount of money for this home. All right. Now, every month, Sarah pays John $1,500. John continues to make the same $1,000 payments, thus keeping $500 a month in profit. All right. Now let's look at a storyboard and see what that looks like. Okay. Here's John. All right. He's living in his house and he is making payments to the bank. Right. Now here's Sarah. Okay. She's like, oh, I want to own your house. And John's like, okay, cool. Well, I'll sell it to you. Sarah says, well, I don't qualify for traditional financing. John says, that's okay. You just make the payments to me and then you get to keep the home. Now, what's going to happen? What could happen? They could keep their mouth shut, never tell the bank, and live happily ever after, right? What might happen though is that due on sale clause. Okay. If for some reason, let's say John missed a payment to the bank investigates, finds the title of the home has changed, and then they activate that due on sale clause, and Sarah is forced to refinance. Could be at bad terms. She could be losing money. Who knows? All right. No. Due on sale clause. Okay. Loan assumption. So you're probably asking yourself, well, why doesn't Sarah just apply to assume the loan? And you'd be right. But if Sarah has bad credit, whatever, this is a way of doing essentially the same thing, but cutting out John as the middleman and being approved by the lender so that there's no risk of the due on sale clause. Okay. So the buyer assumes or takes over the seller's mortgage under its current terms. The buyer must be qualified and approved by the lender. Okay. This can be a really big hurdle to overcome, especially if it was a VA loan that is on that property. All right. This avoids the risk of the due on sale clause. All right. The buyer must pay the equity balance to the seller. All right. That's another big hurdle. Okay. If the seller has significant equity in the home, okay, you essentially have to buy down that equity to assume that mortgage. Right. The reason that I put a pot of gold here for this method is because this is huge right now. During COVID, a lot of people refinanced their homes or bought homes with mortgages that have 2.5% or 3% interest rates, right? Or somewhere in that ballpark. They're still out there. Okay. And a lot of them are offering to sell that home if you pay the difference in the equity, all right, and qualify for the lender. And so for a significant amount of money down, though, you could assume a mortgage at 2.5% or 3% interest, making that property extremely cash flow worthy. Okay. So we'll go into a specific example of that. All right. John, we're back to John, has $50,000 in equity in his home, but still owes $100,000 on his mortgage at 2.5% APR. His home is valued at $150,000. Sarah, same Sarah, offers John $175,000 on his home, contingent on assuming his loan. Okay, so she's saying, I'm going to give you $25,000 more than your home is worth if I can assume your loan. Right? Sarah applies to the bank to assume John's loan. The bank approves it. Right? After the approval, she pays John $75,000. Again, it's that difference plus a little bit of cushioning for John. All right. And she assumes the same mortgage terms. It's now hers. She just got a property at a 2.5% interest rate. So she's probably going to rent it out and make a ton of money. All right. Storyboard. What does that look like? So we have John here. He's living in his home. He's making payments for the bank. John gets stationed in Guam, whatever, needs to leave, needs to sell his home. Sarah is approved by the bank, moves in. That's it. She is now essentially the new John. All right. Subject to. So the buyer purchases the property subject to the existing financing. All right. So there's a big movement right now. Pace Morby is kind of leading the charge. He's the guru on this. If you want to Google it, it's called the Sub 2. Yeah, it's a really big community, worth a Google or YouTube search. Okay. So buyer purchases the project subject to existing financing. This means the buyer takes over the payments of the seller's existing mortgage without formally assuming the loan. The loan stays in the seller's name, but the buyer owns the property. The title is transferred to the owner, but the mortgage is not. Okay, so that's an important detail that differs from the other methods. The title is transferred to the owner, the mortgage is not. The buyer pays the mortgage directly instead of the seller. Okay, this could also trigger the due on sale clause, and that's why I have this military real estate agent here saying, don't tell, right? Because you shouldn't be telling the mortgage company about this, or they will probably want you to refinance. Okay. So here's an example. Same John owes $150,000 at 4% interest on his home. His payments are $900 a month. He agrees to sell to Sarah subject to his loan. Sarah pays John $20,000 upfront to cover the equity already in the home and starts making payments on the home in John's name. Sarah and John never tell the bank out of fear of the due on sale clause. So they just take that secret to their grave. All right. You're probably thinking, wow, that's placing a lot of trust in Sarah. And it is, because if Sarah stops making payments in John's name to the mortgage company, guess who the mortgage company is going to come after? It's not Sarah. They're going to come after John. So that could ruin John's credit and ultimately put him in a lot of debt if for some reason Sarah stops paying. Okay, so take this for what it's worth. There are people who have made a lot of money using this method, so don't just discount it. All right, it has worked for some. I personally have never used it, but it could work. All right, here's a storyboard. Pretty much exactly like the other one. John goes off to Guam, right? Sarah moves in the house, starts making payments. Okay, but they never tell the bank. And guess what could happen? Yep, the due on sale clause. It can come after you. All right. Halloween's getting close. You gotta make it interesting, right? So here's a little cheat table I created with some differences in here, just to highlight these differences. You'll see you look for like lease option, right? The ownership transfers, maybe. I can send this to you guys if it helps, but yeah, it just kind of sums everything up. If we have any questions, we can come back to it. Speaking of, are there any questions? Let's see, do we have, looks like we've got a couple chat messages. All right, Nick, for loan assumptions, do realtors have tools to find these types of opportunities for investors? Oh man, that's tough. So you can look on the MLS for these types of deals. Most of the ones you're going to find on the MLS, you're better off just going with bank financing. Most, I would say, most traditional financing comes off market. Okay, they come from word of mouth, just knowing investors in the community, and they come from wholesalers or people who are doing wholesale like campaigns, sending out direct mailers, asking people, would you consider selling your home? And then you talk directly to them and they're like, well, I've got a mortgage with 2.5% interest, and they're, honed in. So yeah, tools to find these types of opportunities. There are websites that advertise that. In my experience, none of them are very good, to be honest. You really do have to you just have to kind of bulk ask. It doesn't hurt to ask. The worst they can do is say no. But if you do want to go on the MLS, you could just send out a bunch of feeler messages, send out a bunch of LOIs saying, hey, I'd like to purchase your home. Here's a couple options. And one is seller financing, and the other is you could say a sub-2 loan assumption, So it doesn't hurt to ask. Legally, the realtor is obligated to show that offer to the client. So who knows? It could work. There are people who have made a ton of money doing this. The methods that, from what I understand, are sending out mass mailers or callers, and just finding people who have significant equity in their home and could seller finance or could do wrap mortgages, etc. So if you're able to find an awesome website that does this, please let me know. Cool. Any other questions? We're right at the 30-minute mark.
While we wait for anyone else to drop in a question, I'm just going to share my screen real quick and show you how on my MLS, I don't know if it's different on, it probably will be different on your MLS, but here's one way to look for assumptions on your MLS. So pull it up.
Oh, soon rate.
I've been checked out that website. So right now I'm actually doing my first loan assumption for a client. So I'm representing the sellers and the buyers are also selling their home. They're closing tomorrow. So it's kind of a domino of a situation, but the buyers that are selling their home that close tomorrow, they're selling their home for 1.6. And then they're buying a house right on the water for 1.925. The loan balance is about 1.45. And so it's just about 400 and some K that they're going to be making up the difference for. And then assuming that loan for 1.45 with a 2.5% interest rate. And so when you first hear that, you don't really think it's that big of a deal about like assuming that lower rate. But over the course of the remainder of that life of that loan, the new buyers that are assuming that loan are going to end up saving about $1 million by having that lower rate compared to going with the current rates, 6.5 or 7%. So here's a quick look at the MLS, and the way it's structured on here, you can look for keywords. And so there's not like a little check box that says like assumable loan or anything like that. But if you add on these additional fields, so this is what most people have their MLS set up, where you can just put these basic features: number of bedrooms, bathrooms, address, street name, whatever. But you can add on these additional fields at the bottom. And so I add on all those additional fields because sometimes you want to just customize the search for people. But if you search for remarks, it might be worded differently, and your MLS might be like comments or something like that. And so I go down to the remarks box, and there's like 3 different ones: private remarks, public remarks, selling agent remarks. Okay, so those are the main ones. And so if I go public remarks, that's what shows up on Zillow, Trulia, the actual MLS. And then for selling agent remarks, that appears just to the selling agents. So I'll end up searching through both of those. And so since I don't want it to be like too restricted, I'll just search one at a time, because if I were to put public remarks and selling agent remarks, it might sift out some of them that don't have the assumption mentioned in both of those boxes. And so just to show you real quick up here, so right now it's telling me there's 2,060 properties available that are coming soon or active. And so now I go back down to that remarks box, and I just type in ASUU, and I stop at M, because some people might spell assumption wrong. They might say assumable loan. There's all kinds of different variations out there. But the way my MLS is set up, so it tells you right here, if the full name is not known or spelling is unclear, use the asterisk as a wildcard to replace the missing information. So whatever key term you want to search for, you put an asterisk on both sides of it, and then kind of like the Control F feature on PDFs and Word documents, it'll search through the public remarks of every listing for ASUUM. So go back up. So we were at 2060. Now we're down at 48. And so then that's a pretty good number of properties to look for. And so I might sift through those, see if there's one in the area that I'm looking for a client, and see what kind of situation they have for that. So see what kind of options they have over near where I live. So I pull up this one right here, look at the public remarks, and boom, there it is. VA assumption at 2.375. That sounds fantastic. However, you need to talk to that agent, get the loan balance. And I believe I did talk to this agent recently, and the loan balance is something like 500. So then that's about 130K difference between the loan balance and the purchase price. So like Nick was mentioning, and I hadn't thought about doing the seller financing to make up the difference. But you could do a second mortgage if the bank will allow it. Or you could do, if they have that cash available, they want to borrow from their TSP, whatever it is. There's really no situation that if with a rate this low, if you're telling them to borrow from their TSP, they might be looking at you crazy because they're like, oh, that's my life savings. This rate is going to end up saving them way more than whatever it's going to cost to borrow that money from their TSP. So yeah, that's how to search. I'm sure it's structured a little differently, but there's probably a way to efficiently search for loan assumptions on your MLS instead of just clicking through all 2,000 of the properties and trying to find the opportunity. But then I had a couple other things I wanted to mention.
That's huge. Thanks, Zor.
Yeah. Let me stop this sharing. Not seeing my stop share button. Anyways, let me find my little notes here. But yeah, this is all some really great stuff to consider. When I was first hearing things about seller financing, and my knowledge of seller financing is very shallow still, but I was like, every time I hear something, I'd get excited about it and be like, oh, because I'm getting out of the military and I want to buy a place before my W-2 income ends. So I was, trying to talk to realtors and stuff about buying the property that they're listing. And a lot of people just, they don't know themselves. Like there's the level of knowledge among other realtors out there. You'd be surprised by how either the knowledge is just not there, or they're just not willing to put the work in to make something like this happen. And so if you do the research, you talk to a title company, you have that good working relationship, able to get the documents in place, and you have the full plan laid out, you can have a secret recipe for capitalizing on these types of deals, and then starting your own podcast, whatever it is, to pull people in to make a name for yourself in doing these kinds of deals, especially in a situation like we are right now with the higher interest rates. Like Nick said up front, every state has different rules, and so like hard in Hawaii, hard money is pretty challenging to work with. I haven't gotten in black and white exactly why it's so hard, but they're a lot of the hard money lenders back in the mainland aren't willing to lend out here. It probably the biggest factor is probably the permitting process in Hawaii. It takes anywhere from 12 to 18 months to get a permit approved, so that's probably one of the big things. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And then yeah, what Nick mentioned about the appraisal gap, doing seller financing for that's another thing I hadn't thought about. And because there were a lot of appraisal gaps back in like 2020 through 2022, and there probably still are some now, but before it'd be like potentially the deal's broken, your buyer that you're representing that doesn't have the cash to make up the difference has to walk away from the deal. But if you were to offer to do the seller financing and you've put in a little bit of homework ahead of time to understand how it's going to work, you could say, hey, seller, I know the appraisal came in kind of low. I know we didn't have a appraisal clause built in saying that we have cash to make up for it, because we do not have the cash to make up for it. So it was a $50,000 gap. We're not going to ask you to just say, forget about my 50K. We'll just sell it anyways. We'll pay you that 50K, but it's not going to come all at once. It's going to be over the next year, 5 years, whatever it is. And what another thing Nick might have kind of touched on it during this class, but kind of like the balloon idea, you could say the first year it's going to be interest or payments of like $2,000, and then it'll be a balloon after the second or third year to make it more enticing for the seller, because the seller might be like, I don't want my 50K to be spread out over the next 30 years because that's just ridiculous. And so the way it'd work is after that first year, that house might appreciate by 50K, and you might have the opportunity, and rates go down, all that stuff, and you might be able to refinance and then pay that debt to the seller, and you ended up saving some money there. But yeah, thanks a lot for the class, Nick. That was like I learned a lot, and I'm sure others in here too. Anyone have any personal experiences or questions, anything like that they want to share? Nope. All right. I'll stick around for a few more minutes if anyone wants to ask a question outside of the main group.